The rains had come early that year, rolling down from the red mesas like a punishment and a blessing all at once. For 3 days straight, water fell in silver sheets over the Verde Valley, washing dust off the cottonwoods and turning the river into a churning brown serpent that hissed against its banks. Dr. Lucy Ward rode through the storm with her head bent low, her coat soaked clear through. She had left the town of Prescott 2 weeks earlier, hoping the land would quiet something restless inside her, the ache that came from wanting a child she could never have. The accident 3 years ago had taken more than her ability to bear life. It had taken her sense of purpose. Now she traveled where few dared to go, tending to ranch hands, miners, and the scattered Apache families who still clung to the land that had once been theirs. That afternoon, she stopped at a small supply post 20 miles out from town. The old storekeeper told her about an Apache girl who'd fallen from a horse 2 days prior, bleeding bad from her leg. "Her pa's a quiet one," he'd said, shaking his head. "Lives down by the river bend. Folks say he don't trust anyone, especially not white doctors." Lucy only tightened her reins. "Then it's fortunate," she said, "that I didn't come for his trust." By the time she found the narrow path leading toward the river, dusk was gathering in the low clouds. The smell of wet sage filled the air. Her mare struggled through the mud, hooves sinking deep. When she saw smoke curling from a small cabin under the cottonwoods, she slid from the saddle and called out. No answer came, only the steady rush of the swollen river. Lucy approached slowly, boots squelching in the mud. Through the open doorway, she saw a man bent over a little girl lying on a cot. The child's face was pale, her small leg wrapped in a blood-stained cloth. The man turned sharply when Lucy stepped inside. His hand went to the knife on the table. "I heard there was a hurt child," she said quickly, lifting her hands so he could see they were empty. "I'm a doctor. I can help her." He didn't move, didn't speak. His eyes, dark, watchful, studied her, as if weighing whether mercy was worth the risk. Finally, he nodded once, short and reluctant. "If you can," he said quietly, voice low as gravel. Lucy knelt beside the girl. "What's her name?" "Maya." The child's lashes fluttered as Lucy cut away the dirty bandage. The wound was deep, but clean enough to save. She worked fast, hands steady despite the cold, threading the needle under lamplight. "Hold her still," Lucy said. "I need her to stay still, even if she cries." The man hesitated, then gathered the girl in his arms, pressing her against his chest. "I don't want to hurt her," he murmured. Lucy glanced up at him. His face was taut with fear, not of her, but of failing again. "Sometimes," she said softly, "helping someone means you have to see them hurt." He didn't answer, but his grip steadied. The child whimpered once, then quieted as Lucy stitched the torn flesh. When she was done, she washed the wound with whiskey and wrapped it with clean linen from her kit. "Keep her warm," Lucy said. "She'll need rest and soup if you have it." The man nodded, still holding the little girl. "Thank you." His voice cracked on the last word. Outside, thunder rolled across the hills. Lucy stepped to the door and saw the river rising fast, crawling up over the bank. The road she'd come on was already gone. "You won't cross tonight," the man said behind her. "The river takes horses when it's like this." She turned. "Then I'll stay until morning, if you don't mind." He hesitated, then gestured toward a chair near the hearth. "You can sit. There's coffee if you don't mind it strong." Lucy smiled faintly. "I've yet to meet coffee too strong for me." He poured from an old tin pot, his hands careful. Up close, she noticed how his shoulders were broad, but his posture small, as if he were always trying to take up less space than he was given. "I'm Lucy Ward," she said, accepting the cup. "And you're Maya's father." He nodded once. "Lucas Nietzsche." The name carried quiet weight. They drank in silence, the only sound the rain drumming on the roof, and the child's soft breathing. Lucy studied him over the rim of her cup. There was gentleness in him, but something broken too, a man who had learned to survive by keeping his voice low and his feelings buried. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. "She's a strong little girl." He looked toward the cot, and for the first time a small smile touched his lips, stronger than her father. Lucy set her cup down. "That's not a hard thing to be." He glanced at her then, surprised into a quiet laugh that vanished almost as soon as it came. The fire burned low. Outside the storm deepened. The world reduced to wind and water. Lucy watched the man sit back beside his daughter, tucking a blanket around her, with hands that trembled slightly. There was love in every motion, raw, protective, wordless. She realized, with a pang that caught her off guard, that she hadn't seen tenderness like that in years. When she finally lay down near the hearth, wrapped in her damp coat, she heard him humming something low under his breath, a melody that didn't belong to any hymn she knew. Maya stirred once and whispered drowsily, "Papa, the lady smells like rain." Lucas looked up. His eyes met Lucy's across the dim room. For the first time, he didn't look away. Outside, the river kept rising, muttering against the earth, as if it too remembered the weight of things unspoken. By morning, the storm had spent itself. Mist rose from the river, like breath from a sleeping animal, and the whole valley smelled of wet earth and juniper. Lucy stood outside the cabin, boots sinking into the mud, watching sunlight drip through the cottonwoods. Somewhere downstream, a raven cried. Behind her, she heard the slow creak of a door. Lucas stepped out, his dark hair damp, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He moved quietly, almost apologetically, like a man afraid of disturbing the world around him. "She's still sleeping," he said. His voice was low, hoarse from the long night. Lucy nodded. "That's good. The fever will break soon. The stitches should hold." He seemed about to speak, then only nodded in return. His eyes never lingered long on hers. He looked past her instead to the hills, the sky, anything that wasn't another person. "Do you mind if I wash up by the river?" she asked. He hesitated, then pointed toward a narrow trail. "Watch your step. The bank's soft after rain." Lucy smiled faintly. "I'll manage." She walked down to the water's edge. The river had fallen a little overnight, still brown and restless, but calmer now. She knelt, splashed her face, and for the first time in months, she felt truly awake. The air smelled alive. When she came back, Lucas was chopping wood behind the cabin, each strike steady and measured. Maya sat on the steps, still pale but smiling as she played with a small wooden horse. "Your papa made that?" Lucy asked. Maya nodded proudly. "He makes everything, but he never paints them. He says color belongs to the skies." Lucy laughed softly. He might be right. She spent most of that day tending to Maya and helping where she could. The child followed her everywhere, curious and chatty. Lucas kept to the edges, fixing tools, checking fences, doing what men like him always did, working instead of talking. When Lucy offered to cook supper, Lucas didn't refuse, but his nervousness was almost comical. He hovered near the stove, as if unsure whether it was proper to let a stranger, worse, a white woman, use his kitchen. "I can manage," Lucy said without looking up. "You can sit, you know." He cleared his throat, then actually sat, perched on the edge of the chair, like it might throw him off at any moment. Maya giggled. "Papa doesn't know how to sit still." Lucas gave his daughter a look that was more tender than stern. "You talk too much, little bird." Lucy stirred the pot, pretending not to smile. It was the first easy exchange she'd seen between them. For all his shyness, Lucas's love for the girl was plain in everything he did, how he brushed her hair with careful fingers, how he checked her bandage every hour. When they ate, the silence between them wasn't heavy. The rain had washed something clean. That night, Lucy sat by the hearth, sewing a tear in her coat while Lucas checked the fire. The small cabin glowed warm against the dark outside. "Your husband must miss you," he said suddenly, eyes still on the fire. Lucy froze for a moment, needle halfway through the fabric. "I don't have one." He nodded, as if that explained something he'd wondered, but hadn't dared ask. "I thought a woman like you wouldn't be traveling alone." She let out a short, humorless laugh. "I used to think the same thing, but life has its own ideas." He glanced at her then, curiosity flickering across his face. She saw the question forming and spared him the effort. "There was an accident," she said quietly. "A wagon overturned. I lived, but there were injuries, ones that don't heal." His eyes softened, understanding before words could finish. "I'm sorry." Lucy shook her head. "Don't be. The world keeps moving whether we like it or not." They fell silent. The fire popped. The smell of pine resin filled the room. Maya stirred in her sleep, murmuring something. Lucas rose and covered her with a blanket, his touch gentle as breath. "Your wife," Lucy said softly. "Maya told me she passed." He hesitated, then nodded. 5 years ago. Fever took her fast. Lucy hesitated, unsure if she should go on. "You must miss her terribly." He stared into the flames. "I do. But what I miss more is what I never said to her." He looked up, and for the first time, she saw the full weight behind his silence. "She used to ask me what I was thinking. I'd just smile, thinking she already knew. But people can't read what we never say." Lucy's throat tightened. "You loved her quietly." He nodded once, too quietly. "When she got sick, I kept waiting for the right time to tell her all the words I should have said before. But time doesn't wait, doctor." Her heart ached for him, this man who built fences and carved toys, but didn't know how to speak the simplest truths. After that night, something between them shifted. Lucas didn't talk more exactly, but his silences grew softer, warmer. He started setting out a cup of coffee for her each morning before she came down from the loft. He'd mend her tack without being asked. When she thanked him, he'd just nod, ears flushing pink. One evening, Lucy walked out behind the cabin and found him sitting on the porch, carving a small wooden figure by lamplight. "For Maya?" she asked. He looked up. "For you, actually." She blinked. "For me?" He nodded, shy again, offering the little carving. It was a bird small, unfinished, wings half open. "It's not much," he murmured, "but I thought maybe it could remind you. Not everything that falls stays broken." Her hand trembled slightly as she took it. The carving was rough, but beautiful in its simplicity. Every line made with care. "Thank you, Lucas." He ducked his head. "I just wanted to say it, while I still could." Lucy smiled through a sudden blur of tears. "Then I'd say you just did." Behind them, the river murmured softly under the rising moon, carrying away the last of the storm. The night smelled of wet earth and pine smoke, and in that quiet moment, both of them, doctor and widower, felt something inside them begin very gently to heal. Days stretched into weeks, and the land began to dry again. The grass along the river turned from green to gold. Cicadas hummed in the heat, and Lucy found herself falling into the rhythm of life at the little cabin. She didn't plan to stay, but every morning she found another reason not to leave. Lucas never asked her to. He only built small habits around her presence, the way he'd leave the coffee pot closer to her side of the table, or how he paused his work whenever she stepped outside, as if he wanted to speak, but changed his mind at the last second. He was still shy, almost painfully so. When she caught his gaze, he'd drop it like a boy, caught doing something forbidden. But there was a gentleness in that awkwardness, a sincerity she hadn't known in a long time. Maya was healing fast. Her limp faded, her laughter filled the cabin. She followed Lucy everywhere, asking questions about bones and medicines, the kind of curiosity that couldn't be taught. Maybe she'll grow up to be a doctor, Lucy said one evening, brushing the girl's hair. Lucas, sitting by the hearth, smiled faintly. Or a teacher. She's got her mother's eyes, always asking why. You talk about her sometimes, Lucy said softly. You loved her very much. He looked down at his hands, rough and scarred from work. I did. Still do, in a way. Love doesn't die. It just changes shape until it doesn't hurt so bad. Lucy set the brush aside. You're right. Pain doesn't leave, it just learns to speak quieter. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, neither looked away. That night, while the wind sighed through the cottonwoods, Lucy couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the loneliness that had settled around her life, like dust on an unused book. Lucas had it too, that quiet ache of someone who'd once had everything and learned to live without. The next afternoon, she was in the small garden behind the cabin when Lucas approached, wiping sweat from his brow. He held out a basket of apples, shy as ever. For you, he said. They're small this year, but sweet. Thank you, she replied, taking one. Would you like to try one with me? He hesitated. I should check the fences before dark. Or, she said lightly, you could sit down for 5 minutes and talk to someone who's been alone too long. His lips quirked, half a smile, half surrender. He sat. They ate the apples in silence. When she bit into hers, juice ran down her wrist. She laughed, wiping it with her sleeve. It's been years since I tasted anything this fresh. Lucas looked at her, then said so quietly she almost missed it. You laugh like someone who hasn't forgotten how. She glanced at him, surprised. And you talk like someone who finally remembers how. He flushed, looking down at the ground. I'm not good at words. I've noticed, she teased gently. He chuckled, embarrassed. When I talk too much, things go wrong. Maybe the right person just never listened, she said. His eyes lifted to hers again. There it was, that fragile space between fear and wanting. For a moment, Lucy thought he might say something, but instead, he rose and murmured, I'll get back to the fences. That night, she found him sitting alone outside, staring at the moon. The air smelled of dust and sage. She joined him, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. Why do you always stop yourself from speaking? She asked. He was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, because I'm afraid that when I open my mouth, something good might break. Lucy frowned. Break. He nodded. The last time I tried to tell someone what I felt, it was too late. I waited, thinking there would be another day. There wasn't. She understood now. His silence wasn't pride, it was punishment. Lucas, she said gently, you don't lose people because you speak. You lose them because you stay silent. He looked at her, eyes dark in the lamplight. You sound like you've lost someone too. I have, she admitted. Not a person. A part of myself. The part that believed I could be a mother. He turned fully toward her. The accident? She nodded. A wagon overturned. I survived. But something inside me didn't. The doctors told me I'd never bear children. I told myself I didn't care. That work would be enough. It wasn't. He said nothing, only watched her with quiet compassion. Finally, he said, when my wife died, I stopped talking. When you lost that, maybe you stopped living a little. Maybe we both forgot how to be whole. His words settled between them like a truth neither could deny. A breeze stirred the long grass. Lucy drew a breath. You ever wonder, she asked softly, if the Lord gives second chances? He smiled faintly. Maybe not in the way we expect. Maybe he sends someone who reminds us what we still have left. Their hands brushed just barely, and neither pulled away. When Lucy finally stood to go inside, he rose too. For once, he didn't look away. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For listening when I finally found the words. Lucy felt her throat tighten. Then keep finding them, Lucas. Don't let silence win again. He nodded, his voice a whisper carried by the wind. Not this time. Inside the cabin, Maya murmured in her sleep, and Lucy paused by the doorway, looking back. Lucas still stood there, moonlight on his face, shoulders no longer hunched as before. The night had changed him a little, or maybe it had changed them both. By early August, the heat came back with a vengeance. The air shimmered above the prairie grass, and the river that had once raged now whispered low, curling lazy around the bends. Life had settled into a fragile peace, Lucy tending the small garden, Maya chasing dragonflies, and Lucas mending fences that didn't need mending, just to keep his hands busy. But peace in a place like that never lasted long. One afternoon, as Lucy was grinding herbs inside, she noticed the shadow of 3 riders moving across the yard. The sound of hoofs broke the stillness. Maya ran to the window. Strangers, Papa, she said. They don't look friendly. Lucas froze where he stood, his hand tightening around the handle of his knife. Then he stepped out onto the porch, shoulders squared but eyes wary. The riders reined in their horses a few feet from the porch. Their leader, a thick-shouldered man in a gray coat, tipped his hat with mock politeness. Afternoon, he said, voice slick with arrogance. We're looking for Dr. Lucy Ward. Lucy stepped out beside Lucas before he could speak. I'm Dr. Ward, she said evenly. What can I do for you? The man's eyes flicked from her to Lucas and back, a smirk forming. Word in Prescott is, you've been keeping company with one of them Apache fellas. Folks are starting to talk. Lucy's jaw tightened. Then tell those folks to mind their own damn business. The second rider laughed. That's a fine way for a lady to talk. Lucas moved a step forward, his voice calm but low. You've said what you came to say. Now go. The leader looked him over slowly, his smirk turning mean. You got something to hide, friend? Lucas didn't answer. His hand hovered near the knife at his belt, but Lucy saw the tremor in his fingers. Not fear of the men, but fear of himself, of what might happen if he acted. He'd always been afraid of confrontation. She could see it pulling at him now. Gentlemen, Lucy said, stepping between them, I'd advise you to leave before this becomes something you'll regret. The man's smirk faltered. He spat into the dirt. You're making a mistake, miss. You stay out here with him, and folks'll say you're one of them. Lucy's voice didn't waver. Then they'll be right. For a moment, no one breathed. Then the man pulled on his reins. Come on, he muttered to his men. Let's go before the river rises again. When they were gone, the silence felt heavier than their presence. Lucas stood still, his jaw clenched tight. They'll come back, he said finally. People like that always do. Lucy touched his arm gently, then let them. I'm not leaving because some frightened men can't understand kindness. He shook his head. You don't know how far they'll go. I've lived with fear long enough, she said softly. I won't let it rule me anymore. He turned away, his hands trembling. You shouldn't have stood in front of me like that. I didn't do it for you, she said, smiling faintly. I did it for me. That night, neither of them slept. The wind howled through the valley, shaking the loose shutters. Lucy sat near the hearth, staring at the small wooden bird Lucas had carved for her. He'd told her once that not everything that falls stays broken, but now, watching the shadows dance across the walls, She wondered how many times the heart could break before it stopped mending at all. Lucas came in from checking the door. He stopped when he saw her awake. "You should rest." "So should you," she said. "You've been pacing since sundown." He rubbed the back of his neck, embarrassed. "I keep thinking about what they said, about what could happen." Lucy studied him quietly. "You've lived your life avoiding trouble, haven't you?" He hesitated, then nodded. "My people learned what happens when you don't. When I was younger, I thought being quiet kept me fine. But quiet didn't save my wife. It didn't stop fever, or loss, or hate." He looked up at her, the lamplight catching the pain behind his eyes. "I thought if I stayed still enough, the world would leave me alone. But it never does it?" "No," she said softly. "It doesn't." They sat in silence, the fire crackling between them. Finally, Lucy said, "When those men came, you were ready to speak, but you didn't. Why?" He exhaled hard, shaking his head. "Because I was afraid I'd say the wrong thing. I always am." "Lucas," she said gently, "silence is worse than the wrong words. It's what kills you slow." He looked at her for a long time, then said quietly, "You're not afraid of anything, are you?" "I'm afraid of plenty," she replied, "but fear doesn't mean surrender." Maya's voice broke the moment. "Papa?" she called sleepily from her bed. "Is it still raining?" "No, little bird," he said, softening. "Just the wind talking." The next morning, the wind died, but something had shifted inside him. Lucy saw it in the way he carried himself, less shrinking, more rooted. When she went to gather herbs near the fence line, he followed her, helping without being asked. By midday, they heard horses again. Lucy froze. Lucas's hand found hers before either could think. The same 3 men rode up, dust rising behind them. This time they didn't dismount. The leader sneered, "Just checking to see if the good doctor's changed her mind." Lucas stepped forward before Lucy could speak. His voice was steady now, louder than she'd ever heard it. "She hasn't, and neither have I." The man smirked. "You think you can stand against the whole town, Apache?" Lucas didn't flinch. "If it means keeping what's mine, I'll stand." The man laughed, but didn't linger. Something in Lucas's tone, quiet but unbreakable, made him turn his horse. They rode off, muttering curses. When the dust settled, Lucy turned to Lucas. He was shaking, but his eyes were clear. "You did it," she whispered. "You stood your ground." He smiled faintly, the first real smile she'd seen from him. "My legs are still weak." "That's how you know it's courage," she said. "If you weren't scared, it wouldn't mean anything." He let out a shaky laugh. "You're teaching me too much, doctor." She reached out, touched his hand. "Then promise me, you'll never stop talking when something matters." He hesitated, then squeezed her fingers gently. "I promise. I'm done letting silence take things from me." Behind them, the wind shifted, carrying the scent of the river. It wasn't the storm's howl anymore, but something softer, the promise of calm after years of quiet fear. And for the first time since his wife's death, Lucas Nietzsche didn't feel like a man hiding from the world. He felt like a man finally stepping into it. Autumn came soft to the valley that year. The cottonwoods turned gold. The air thinned with cool wind, and the river slowed to a whisper. Lucy felt it in her bones, not just the change of season, but the change in the rhythm of her days. Lucas had changed too. The shyness was still there, tucked under his voice, but it no longer ruled him. He spoke more, laughed sometimes. When he did, it was like hearing sunlight low and warm, as if he was still surprised he remembered how. Maya grew stronger every day. She chased the chickens around the yard, climbed trees, and came home muddy and triumphant. Some nights, she would fall asleep in Lucy's lap, and Lucas would watch from the doorway, that quiet look on his face, that said everything words could not. Life had become something steady, ordinary, and beautiful. And for the first time in years, Lucy dared to believe it might last. One evening, as dusk painted the sky pink and amber, Lucas was fixing the hinges on the barn door while Lucy stacked firewood. Maya sat nearby, singing a nonsense tune about the moon. When the child went inside, Lucy wiped her hand and looked at Lucas. "You never told me," she said. "How did you learn to carve like that?" He paused, setting down the hammer. "My father taught me," he said. "Said a man's hands should build more than fences." Lucy smiled softly. He was right. Lucas straightened, hesitated, then reached into his pocket. "Been working on something." He handed her a small piece of wood, smooth and pale. It was a carving of a bird wing spread, polished to a shine. "It's finished," he said. She ran her thumb over the grain. "It's beautiful. What kind of bird is it?" He met her eyes, a faint smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "A phoenix," he said. "It burns and comes back new." Lucy looked down at it, her throat tightening. "You really believe things can come back?" His gaze softened. "I have to." She wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. The light faded, leaving only the sound of the river and the hum of crickets. Then Lucas said quietly, "You know, I never thanked you for staying." "You already did," she said. "No," he insisted gently. "I mean for more than that. For not seeing me the way others do. For hearing me even when I couldn't speak right." Her breath caught. "You've always spoken just fine, Lucas. You just needed someone to listen." He stepped closer. The air between them shifted, heavier now. His eyes held hers, that same dark warmth that had frightened her once. Only now, it felt like home. "Lucy," he said, voice barely above a whisper, "I don't want to spend another day not saying the things I should." She swallowed hard. "Then say them." He took a breath. "I love you." The words landed soft as snow, but they shook her to the core. She didn't answer at first. The world seemed to still the wind, the crickets, even the river. Then she reached for him, her voice breaking. "I've waited my whole life to hear that from someone who meant it." Lucas's hand found hers, rough and sure. "I mean every word." The kiss came slowly, like the ending of a long-held breath. It wasn't rushed or wild. It was steady, certain, and honest. It felt like forgiveness, like a second chance neither had known they were allowed. When they finally pulled apart, Lucy rested her forehead against his. "You're trembling," she whispered. "So are you." "That it just means it is real," she said, smiling. He chuckled, low and soft, then kissed her again. The weeks that followed felt dreamlike. They worked side by side, tending the garden, mending fences, watching Maya grow bolder. The house felt fuller now, not from sound, but from belonging. Yet beneath the peace, something new stirred in Lucy, a strange, quiet exhaustion she couldn't shake. At first she blamed the season. Then the nausea came, the dizziness. The days she couldn't eat without her stomach turning. Lucas noticed first. "You look pale," he said one morning as she sat outside, her hands pressed to her belly. "Should I fetch the doctor from town?" She shook her head. "No, I'll figure it out." Later that afternoon, she took her small bag of instruments and checked herself, pulse, temperature, every sign she could recall. When realization struck, she dropped the stethoscope. Her knees went weak. It couldn't be. It shouldn't be. She sat there for a long time, staring at the river, through tears that came without warning. When Lucas found her, she was trembling, the little bird carving clutched tight in her hand. "Lucy?" he asked softly. "What's wrong?" She looked up at him, voice barely a whisper. "I think I'm with child." He froze, unsure he'd heard right. I shouldn't be," she said, almost laughing through the tears. They told me it was impossible. Lucas knelt beside her, taking her hands in his. And yet it happened. She shook her head. I don't understand how. Maybe it's not for us to understand, he said quietly. Maybe some things happen because the heart keeps asking, even when the mind has given up. Lucy laughed through her tears, pressing her full forehead to his. Do you realize what this means? Yes, he whispered. It means the world just gave you back what it took away. They stayed like that for a long time, the sound of the river filling the silence between them. When she finally looked up, she said, You remember what Maya told you the night we met? He frowned, thinking back. She said you smelled like rain. Lucy smiled, tears glistening. Maybe she was right. Maybe I just needed the storm to pass before anything could grow again. Lucas touched her cheek gently. You are the rain, Lucy. You make things live. She leaned into his hand, and in that moment, all her doubts fell away. Whatever miracle had taken place didn't need to be explained. It only needed to be cherished. That night, they sat together on the porch, watching the moon climb above the cottonwoods. Lucas's arm was around her, her head resting against his shoulder. The world was quiet again, but it no longer felt empty. The hush between them was not fear this time, it was peace. And beneath her heartbeat, faint but sure, another rhythm had begun, small, steady, and full of promise. Winter came quiet that year. Snow dusted the high peaks, and the air smelled of pine and smoke. The river, once wild and brown, now ran clear and blue, under a pale sky, slow, patient, eternal. Lucy stood on the porch wrapped in a wool shawl, her hands resting on the curve of her belly. She was 6 months along now, though some days it felt like longer. The child moved strong beneath her palms, steady and alive, a miracle that still caught her breath. Maya darted through the yard, chasing the last of the autumn leaves that skittered over the frozen ground. Her laughter rang across the valley, bright and fearless. Lucas stepped up behind Lucy, his presence warm, even before she felt his arms circle her waist. He rested his chin gently on her shoulder. She's wearing out the boots you fixed last week, he murmured. Lucy smiled. Then she's living just right. And they watched the child for a while, the way she ran, the way she stopped to pick up a rock and hold it to the light, as if every small thing in the world deserved a closer look. Lucas's hand covered hers. Sometimes I still can't believe it, he said. All of this. Lucy turned slightly. The baby? He nodded. The baby. You. Us. I used to think I'd already lived my whole life by the time you showed up at my door. She leaned back against him. Maybe we just had to lose everything before we could find the rest. He smiled faintly. You sound like the preacher in town. I sound like someone who's finally content, she said. For a while, they said nothing. The sun dipped lower, spilling gold across the grass. The river caught the light and turned silver blue, the same color, Lucy thought, as hope. A week later, a rider appeared on the ridge. Lucas saw her first, an older Apache woman, wrapped in a wool blanket, riding alone. The air between them changed. He straightened, uneasy. Lucy came to the doorway. Who is she? He hesitated. Council elder. My wife's aunt. The woman dismounted slowly, her dark eyes scanning the cabin, the garden, the smoke from the chimney. When her gaze fell on Lucy, she gave a curt nod. I've heard stories, she said in halting English. The white doctor who lives among us now. Lucy bowed her head politely. Ma'am. The woman's attention shifted to Lucas. Your choice brings whispers, she said. Some say you forget who you are. I haven't forgotten, he replied calmly. I just stopped living like a ghost. The woman's eyes softened, then moved to Lucy's belly. She stared for a long moment, her voice lowering. They said she could not have children. Lucy swallowed. That's what I was told. The elder nodded slowly, something unreadable in her expression. Then the Great Spirit must have chosen otherwise. And she reached into her pouch and pulled out a small bundle wrapped in doeskin. Inside was a bracelet made of carved beads, old and worn smooth by time. She placed it in Lucy's hands. "This belonged to my sister," she said quietly. "She married a white man long ago. People judged her too. But she taught us that love between worlds is not weakness. It is courage." Lucy blinked back tears. "Thank you." The elder looked at Lucas. "Protect her spirit," she said, "not just her body. A man who can do that is never forgotten." Lucas bowed his head. "I will." Without another word, the woman mounted her horse and rode away toward the hills, leaving silence in her wake. Lucy held the bracelet tightly, feeling the smooth edges under her thumb. "It feels warm," she whispered. Lucas smiled. "Maybe it remembers." That night, the three of them sat by the fire, Maya asleep in her blanket, Lucy resting against Lucas's shoulder. The air smelled of cedar and ash. "Do you ever miss her?" Lucy asked quietly. He didn't pretend not to understand. "Every day," he said. "But it's different now. When I think of her, it's not pain anymore. It's gratitude. She gave me Maya, and somehow that led me to you." Lucy reached for his hand. "And I think she'd want you to be happy." "I think," he said with a soft smile, "she'd like you." Lucy laughed gently. "Then I'll take that as a blessing." But they sat for a long time, listening to the wind move through the trees. Outside, the stars came out one by one, bright, sharp, endless. At last Lucas spoke again. "You remember the night those men came from town?" "I remember," she said. "I was so scared I could hardly breathe," he admitted. "But I said what needed saying anyway. That was the first time I realized courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about being afraid and speaking anyway." Lucy smiled, eyes glistening. "You're learning fast, Mr. Nightjay." He leaned down, kissed her forehead. "Good teacher." Months later, when spring returned, the river ran high again, clear and cold with snowmelt. The world was alive. Lucy gave birth in early April, just as the cottonwoods began to bloom. The baby came small but strong, a boy, his skin the color of sun-warmed earth, his cry fierce as thunder. Lucas held him with both hands, trembling, awe in every breath. "He's perfect," he whispered. Lucy smiled weakly, tears in her eyes. "We'll name him Rain," she said, "for everything he washed clean." Outside, Maya danced barefoot in the grass, laughing as sunlight poured down. The river shimmered blue behind her, endless and forgiving. On the porch, Lucas stood behind Lucy, one arm around her shoulders, the other holding their son close to his chest. She leaned back into him, exhausted and glowing. He whispered, "I used to think the river only took things away." "And now?" she asked. "Now I know it brings them back too." Lucy looked out over the land, the house, the child, the man who'd once been too afraid to speak. All of it fragile and miraculous, like the first green shoot after a long winter. The wind moved through the valley, carrying the smell of rain. And as the sun dipped low over the blue river, Lucy Ward closed her eyes, whispering the words that had begun it all, words that had changed two lives and made a new one possible. "I want a child from you," she murmured, smiling at the memory. Lucas's arms tightened around her. "And you got one," he said softly. "You got us all."